Hello, everybody. This is Betsy Wurzel, host of Chatting with Betsy and Passionate World Talk Radio. Jeanne White is the producer and writes the blog, which I suggest you read. And please subscribe and share this podcast. If you miss any of this podcast, you can hear it on Spreaker, Spotify, Google, Amazon Alexa. And believe me, you do not want to miss this show. I am so excited. I have a wonderful guest on. She's a gal after my own heart. I want to introduce Dr. Marianne Matzo. I hope I pronounced your name right.
You did perfect. Hi, Betsy.
Thank you. Hi, thank you for coming on, Marianne.
You invited me.
Oh, you're welcome. I talked on Marianne's show last week. Everyone dies, and people might say, "Oh, well, why did you pick that name? Everyone dies." So could you please tell people about yourself and your podcast, which I highly recommend listeners go on to subscribe to Marianne's podcast because they are so helpful, very helpful. I really like them a lot, and I think you're doing a wonderful service. So please tell us.
So the webpage is everyonedies.org. It's EBERY, the number 1, dies, DIES.org. And on there, you're going to find a whole series of blogs and podcasts about the topic of dying and death and bereavement. And I've worked, Betsy, 44 years as a registered nurse and nurse practitioner and certified in hospice and palliative care. I'm certified in gerontology and also certified in advanced oncology nursing. And last year I retired from my full-time work, and one of the things that I wanted to do was do public education about mortality, because in caring for patients, older patients, oncology patients, sort of a universal theme with them, and we're known in the United States also with thinking that death is optional. And, it's sort of like, spoiler alert, everyone dies. It's just, let me tell you how it's going to end. And, I can't tell you the exact details of how each of us are going to die, but I can promise you that we all will. It's a function of our mortality. It's the way that God made us. It's the way that every living thing goes through a cycle of birth and death. And given that it's not optional, so first is that education that, you can fight all you want, you can exercise all you want, you can take all the vitamins and do everything absolutely perfect, but there will come a time where your body will wear out and it will die. And so given that that's true, what are the choices that we want to make? We want to be able to make our own choices, our own decisions all throughout our life. And the end of life is not a period where you suddenly want to stop and say, okay, somebody else make these decisions for me. So what are the choices? What are the issues? What goes on with different kinds of diseases? How do you die from coronavirus? We have a podcast that talks about that. If you're going to go to the doctor, your healthcare practitioner's office, how do you prepare yourself for that visit so that you can make the most out of the visit, get the information you want, not come home and have your kids say, well, so what did the doctor say? And you say, well, I don't know, there was something about my kidney, and I don't know, was it my blood pressure or my blood sugar? And one of those, and you're not really owning your own health, and your family isn't able to help support you with what you may need to do. So how do you make the best out of a doctor's appointment? So what I kind of did is all the things that I would have wanted my patients to know before they came into their office visit with me, I'm offering to our listeners to say, you can have this information. And you might not need it for yourself, but there may be a friend, there may be a family member, there'll be somebody, I promise you, there will be somebody where if you have that information, it will make things easier.
Absolutely. I have to share this with you, Maryanne. When Matt was in the hospital and he was near the end, I talked to a hospice doctor. He told me he has 15 minutes to see a patient, examine a patient, and talk about end of life with them. He says from the age of 65 up, he talks about end of life. And I said, well, I talk about end of life on my talk show. And he said to me, that's great, because it's people like you and like you yourself, Maryanne, that make his job easier, he said. Because if people hear the show, they will know to start thinking about the end of life, the decisions to make. If you're a caregiver, it's very important that you have this for your loved one. Now, I tell people, you may not agree with your loved one's decisions, but that's okay. You have to respect your loved one's decisions about their end of life and what they choose. What say you about that?
Well, that's true. There's a difference, though, between respecting your wishes. Let's say, you or I are at the end of, our lives, and as each other's friends, it's like, well, okay, Betsy, I want you to respect what it is I want. But if you're not my durable power of attorney, if you're not my person who's supposed to be doing, substitute judgment in terms of, okay, if I'm not able to make a decision for myself and you are the person I've designated, you have to be more than respectful of my decisions. You have to make decisions the way I would make decisions if I were able to, if I were awake to be able to do that. And that's a big difference in terms of how you're picking the person who's going to be your durable power of attorney. Right? It's not just about, oh, I respect what you want, Mom. But if, hey, I say to you, I want you to make these decisions, and then the time comes, and then the person who is the durable power of attorney says, well, Mom really didn't want to be on the ventilator, but I'm just not ready to let her go, so put her on the ventilator. Well, what the physician is going to do is they're going to put him on the ventilator because you are the person that, I've designated to make that decision. So it was my job to pick the person who was going to do what I wanted them to do. And if I didn't pick that person, and say, listen, I will haunt you all of your days if you don't do what I'm saying I want you to do in this advance directive, that they will follow the person who's going to be living, and that person who's going to be living is your durable power of attorney. I'm at the end of my life, but you'll still be alive to sue. And so they will go against my wishes, really, so that you don't sue. So you have to think about, is your husband your best person to choose? Is your daughter your best person to choose? Because so many times, especially with children and spouses, they generally really love you, and that clouds or can cloud the decisions that need to be made. And often it's sort of an easier decision maker if you pick, a good friend. Like my decision maker, one of my good friends from graduate school who's a nurse practitioner who can understand what the doctors are going to be saying and can make, she loves me, but she doesn't love me like my daughters love me. So, and why do I want to make my daughters have to make a decision like that? When you're at the bedside of a parent who's at the end of their life, I think my values are that, do you want to put that extra burden on your children? I'd rather burden my friend who is able to have a step back and do what I said I wanted in my advance directive. And then the kids don't have to go the rest of their life saying, well, I made the decision to pull the plug on my mom. And that's another part of why we started this podcast, is that we almost called it Conversations on a Plane, was because whenever I would travel, and if there was somebody sitting next to me who'd say, oh, so what do you do? If I would say, yeah, I'm a nurse, and they'd say, well, what kind of nurse? Oh, I'm a hospice nurse, or I'm, an oncology nurse. 9 times out of 10, Betsy, I would hear, oh, well, then you're going to really be interested in this story. And I think, oh, I okay, because I know what the story is going to be. And what the story is, I killed my mom. I took my mom off the ventilator. And I can't let that go. I can't let that go. I should be able to let it go. I can't let it go. So I say, did you really kill your mom? Well, she was on the vent, and that was the only thing keeping her alive. And, she said she didn't want that. And so I took her off the vent. I pulled the plug. Well, so what you're saying is your mom chose you to be her durable power of attorney. She said, I don't want any of this. And what you did is you did a great act of love and a very selfless thing by doing what your mom wanted you to do. And then there's usually like this silence. Well, when you put it that way, I said, I don't see how there's any other way to look at it. You didn't maliciously kill your mom. You followed her wishes that she asked you to follow. And that was hard, and you feel guilty, but that just shows how much you respected your mom. And in that, kind of conversation, there's that healing. Like, let's really understand what happened here. And that was part of my motivation, too, in starting this podcast, was you don't have to live your life feeling like you did something wrong when you did something so right.
Very good points, Maryanne. I want to suggest to the audience to go on Maryanne's page, Everyone Dies, and hear the podcast about the advance directives. And that's a good point to pick out a friend instead of a relative, because they would be more objective and understanding of what your wishes are. I have to say this because this is kind of funny. My mom, one of the power of attorneys of her medical, and she said, Betsy, I know you're the stronger of the 4. You would have no problem pulling the plug. I was like, well, I don't know if I should be insulted or what. She said, no, it's not an insult. I know that you know what I would want, and you would follow it through. You had the strength in you to do that, and the others don't. So,
I would take that as a compliment, Betsy.
Yes, I was like, don't you think I love you? And I love the fact that you mentioned the guilt. Sometimes myself, and I just think the caregivers are guilty about something, and sometimes I feel like, okay, I told hospice to make Matt comfortable, and they said, with this medication, he was, out of it. Sometimes I question, well, did I kill my husband by letting them medicate him like that? But I know that Matt wanted to be comfortable, and that was his wish, and I wanted him to be comfortable. So I have to, think of that to help me. That,
Well, plus, Betsy, that medication didn't kill Matt. Alzheimer's killed Matt. Or
right.
pneumonia, right. Or, whatever else was going on. That one dose of medicine didn't kill him. And what he did, right. Again, was that selfless act of saying, I don't know, Matt, how much you are feeling, because, the way Alzheimer's works, but in case you are having any pain, I'm going to make sure that you don't suffer in these last days. And that's a phenomenal act of love. So any of your listeners who's saying, oh, well, that last dose of morphine is what killed Mom. Well, because we're mortal, there will always be a last dose of morphine. There will be a last kiss. There'll be a last hug. There'll be a last meal. There's always going to be a last something. So, what are you going to say? Oh, that drink of water that she took, a half hour before she died, that's what killed her. No, that's not. And neither is that last dose of morphine.
Very good point, Marianne, because I hear this a lot in the many groups I belong to. And people have this notion, oh, hospice is there to, kill my loved one, or they killed my loved one. They gave the medicine. I let them do the medicine, but that's not how it is at all. Could you please explain? I know you did palliative care, and I know there's a difference between palliative care and hospice. Could you briefly explain? I would love to do a complete show on this, but could you just give like a little explanation of the difference of the two of them? A teaser, that's right. That's what I was going to say, teaser.
So there is a, if people don't want to wait for us to get around to doing one for your show, there is a podcast on palliative care. It's either the first or the second podcast. It's at everyonedies.org. And remember, the number one is a number one, not spelled out. So if you think about like a lifespan, and at some point, generally people will get some sort of life-threatening or life-limiting illness. So Alzheimer's is one of those. Heart disease is one of those. Diabetes is one of those. Cancer is one of those, right? So palliative care starts at the time of diagnosis. So let's say it's Alzheimer's disease. So at the time of diagnosis, you know that this is a progressive disease. And one of the first things that you should probably do is make sure your will is in order, your advance directive is in order, your money is in order, because at some point you're not going to be able to manage those things. And you don't want anybody to say, oh, she made that change when way down, when she was in stage 2 or stage 3 Alzheimer's disease, and how do we know that she was in her quote-unquote right mind to make those decisions? You don't want to go down that road. If you get that diagnosis, one of your first things is just take care of that. So will you get your diagnosis of Alzheimer's tell you that? Maybe, but maybe not. But that would be a role for palliative care, to say, all right, here's this disease. Here are some things we need to do kind of at the beginning. If you get to these kinds of symptoms, you need to come back and we can manage those. Because from the time of diagnosis all the way through, there's a role for palliative care, which is pain and symptom management for people with life-threatening or life-limiting illnesses. So do you have to be dying to get palliative care? Absolutely not. It is pain and symptom management. And usually, the general public says, well, why can't my doctor just do that? Well, if you're going, let's say you have Alzheimer's and you're going to your neurologist has a 15-minute appointment to manage your Alzheimer's or to manage your Parkinson's or to manage your cancer. Do they have time in that 15 minutes to do that and manage all of your symptoms? Do they have the skill set to do all of that? Because if you're treating cancer, that's a pretty big skill set. You're very specialized. So there's this specialty of palliative care where that's what we really know how to do when we're experts in that. And so come have a 15-minute appointment with us, and all we're going to do is focus on is your pain and symptom management, whatever those symptoms are. Well, with a disease like Alzheimer's, time will march on, and then we'll get to be a point where the function is really not there and not able to swallow, and lots of other kinds of decisions are coming up. And it's hard with Alzheimer's or heart disease or other diseases to say, where are we where this is the last 6 months of their lives? The hospice benefit was built on a less than 6-month prognosis with a cancer model. If you look at progression with people with cancer, you can see a line, a change, approximately 6 months before they die. And we can see it, and we can say, you know, there's something called the surprise question. Would you be surprised if this person were to die in the next 6 months? And if you say, nope, I wouldn't be surprised, that's the point where you would counsel people to elect the hospice benefit. So hospice is, think of it like as a special insurance that's for the last 6 months of your life. Now, what if you live 7? Nobody throws you off. Even if you live a year, nobody throws you off. It's a guess. Would you be surprised? Nope, I wouldn't be surprised by that. Okay, well then let's get this extra layer of care in there. So with that hospice benefit, it comes with RNs to visit the house. It comes with like a home health aide that'll come and, you know, help with meals or bathing, that kind of thing. Comes with a social worker. Comes with a bereavement person for a year after that person's death. So, I mean, all the benefits don't go away at the time of death. Those are available. There's certain things that are available for a year after the death. It'll pay for all the medicine related to the thing that's leading to your death. It'll pay for all equipment if you need a hospital bed or anything. All of that comes with that hospice benefit. So, you know, the palliative care is time of diagnosis up until 6 months before death, and 6 months before death, it's hospice. Does that make sense, Betsy?
Thank you. Thank you for that. And I just wanted to suggest check with your insurance carrier and Medicare to see if they pay for palliative care. It depends on the insurance that you have and your Medicare coverage. Medicare definitely does pay for hospice.
They do pay for hospice. Now, they might not have a benefit that says, here's your benefit for palliative care, but the way that we can bill for that is, let's say if you're short of breath, well, I can bill under that code. If you've got pain, I can bill under that code. So I can bill for the symptoms. So don't let, unless you have absolutely no insurance, that would, well, then I guess maybe you might be eligible for Medicaid. I don't know. But anyway, don't let the fact that, no, they don't have a palliative care benefit keep you from going to a palliative care practitioner, because there's, like I said, they can bill for the symptoms that they're managing for you. So don't let that
information. Oh, thank you. Thank you. That's excellent information.
You're welcome.
I would never have thought of that myself, to suggest billing under a different, name or, symptom. So that's good knowledge to know. And people, Marianne, sometimes they don't have a good image of hospice. They think of hospice as the grim reaper coming. But at the stage of that particular individual, they are at the end of life. So right. I want to make it very clear to the audience, just because you put your loved one on hospice, it doesn't mean the grim reaper is coming. Everyone is different. My father was in a facility. He had hospice for, I think, over a year. Mm-hmm. You just, keep getting it recertified as long as you meet the criteria. And, the images of, hospice, palliative care, the stigma, I feel, needs to change. And what I love about what you're doing is, you're bringing out the taboo, because, when we were growing up, you didn't talk about death and dying. It was a taboo subject. But here on Chatting with Betsy, there is no such thing as a taboo subject. we will discuss whatever, just no cursing. But I just,
the one barrier, Betsy.
Yes, I just love what you're doing, and I do admire you. I mean, folks, Maryanne really, I admire what she's doing. She's taking a taboo subject, and she's teaching about it, and she's helping people understand that, advance directive. I mean, how many times have I've talked about that many times. People need to keep hearing it over and over. People need to hear about the process of dying. It is a process. I worked as an LPN. I didn't even know. I never heard of transitioning. I didn't understand the dying process until, a few years ago. Because back in the Stone Age, when I went to school, 1975, 76, it really wasn't talked about then. Kubler-Ross, I think, who she just started to come out at that time with the stages of, what was it, grieving? Don't even remember, so long ago. And then, and then hospice, was getting a little more popular at that time. So things have drastically changed in over 40 years, and I hope going forward that it changes even more for the better, and understanding the death and dying process and getting advance directives immediately and just being prepared. I think being prepared is very important.
Well, I think if you're denied, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
What I was going to say is if you're denying that something's going to happen, then you're not going to prepare for it. It's like if you're pregnant and you say, oh, I'm not really pregnant, it's like, hey, that baby's going to come out one way or the other, and it might not come out the way that, you're going to be happy with, like, some people who give birth in bathroom stalls or whatever. It's like, sister, nothing you're going to do is going to keep that baby from coming out. So, and it's like the same is true for death. You can say anything you want, you can do anything you want, but we're all going to die. And the question is it going to be your way? Is it going to be consistent with your wishes? Or is it going to be in a way that you say, oh, this isn't what I would have wanted? And I've had so many patients who say, like when they were finally, really truly facing their mortality, that I wish I had made other plans. I wish I'd done other things differently. Well, we don't have to continue that conspiracy of silence and just, wing it in the last 2 weeks of our lives. We can do better than that. We can do things a lot better than that. Yes,
and I'm all for being proactive. We need to be proactive with our last days, the way we want to die, what our wishes are, and to pick a person who will carry them out. And, I even asked Matt, what song would you like at your funeral?
And that's great.
And he told me, and, I took him right away, right after diagnosis. We went, and it's so important. And Maryanne, I think a big problem people have, especially, women with their husbands, is they're going to get mad, I'm going to take their power away. But you're not. You have it just in case you need to make that decision. So I'm all for being proactive and being prepared. And I want to thank you so much for coming on. Is there anything else you'd like to say, Maryanne? And please share again where people could get in touch with you and your page and your podcast.
Well, I think your producer's going to put in her blog our email and all of that. So you could see us on Facebook at Everyone Dies, and that one is all spelled out, EVERY, 0 or ONE. And you can email us if you have questions or if there's topics that you want us to cover sooner than what I actually get around to. I can move things up. That's mail, MAIL, at everyonedies.org, and it's EVERY, the number 1, dies.org. And most importantly, where you can get tons of information and all of our addresses and stuff is on our webpage. Now, the webpage, when you go to it, like it'll say episode 9, I don't know, let's say that's on grief. Well, you can listen to the podcast right there. If you want to make sure that they get into your, wherever you listen to your podcast, you can subscribe, which is wonderful. And but when you go onto the webpage, and the podcast is there, and there's additional resources that are there. There's all the, like for advanced directives, for example, the website is there where you just type in your state, and it'll pull up your advanced directive for you. So all those resources are there. You don't have to go hunting around looking for stuff. What you really need is right there, and it's all stuff that I've reviewed ahead of time. So I make sure that what you're reading is accurate and evidence-based and not anybody's opinion. So did I answer all those questions? Is that everything you wanted me to say about?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. And listeners, I'm telling you, you have to go and listen to these podcasts. And I'm going to just mention, I listened to episode 11 as my first one because I saw it and it just hit me. Is there a difference between grief and mourning? I suggest if you are grieving, listen to it. It helped me immensely.
That's great.
It did. I mean, of course, I cried through it because I can relate to people talking, but it also gave me a sense of comfort to know that what I'm feeling is normal. And I think people want their feelings validated, Maryanne. Oh, is it okay for me to still, shed tears? Of course it is. You'll never get over, a death of a loved one, especially a child, and I wouldn't even want to think about that. But, what you're feeling, it's individual. And grieving is different for everyone. And people don't want to talk about the grieving. They don't want to talk about the mourning. I find that people are uncomfortable around people that are grieving and that are mourning. They don't want to mention
they don't know what to say. They're afraid if they say something, they'll start crying because they miss their dad too. It's sort of this whole circular loss, or the loss within. We all have loss. I mean, who hasn't had a loss? So, but it's okay. You guys can look at each other and cry and laugh at each other later or whatever. It's a universal experience. Don't be afraid of it.
Exactly. I say welcome your grief, accept it, acknowledge it, and don't suppress it because it's going to bite you right in the rear end if you do.
When you least expect it, right?
Yes. So I want to thank you so much, Marianne, for coming on. You heard Dr. Marianne Matzo, and I want to thank you for coming on. Folks, if you
thank you so
missed
much for having me, Betsy.
Oh, you're welcome. If you missed any of this audio cast, please subscribe to Chatting with Betsy on Apple, Google. If you have Amazon Alexa, you can program Amazon Alexa, CastBox, Podchaser, Spreaker, Google, and you can, I appreciate it if you would subscribe to my show. I appreciate it very much. And it is for free, and you won't miss these great shows that I have with great guests such as Dr. Marianne Matzo. And please go on her page and subscribe to her podcast because I'm telling you, it's phenomenal. I have such respect and admiration for what you do, Marianne. It's just wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
It's a wonderful service.
Keeps me off the street, Betsy, in my retirement.
Yes, I'm definitely sure it keeps you busy. You have such admiration for what you do. And people, I just want to remind everyone, I know it's near the end of June, but June is Brain and Alzheimer's Awareness Month. So it's not too late to come on Chatting with Betsy and tell about your experience if you have dementia, or if you are a caregiver, or if you were a caregiver. Come on my show and tell your story, which can then help somebody else. And in a world where you could be anything, be kind, be safe, wear your mask, wash your hands. And until I chat with you again, just be kind. This is Betsy Wurzel, host of Chatting with Betsy and Passionate World Talk Radio. Bye-bye now.